Isn't it great to be South African? It is so great. It is so great. I want to talk about the infinite greatness of being human, the value of every human being, the value of every person in this country, and the power of giving people access and how that can change lives. I also want to talk about the incredible, amazing youth in this country. I've been blessed to work with more than 7,000 of these youth. They are brave, they're passionate, they're courageous. They're just incredible, vibrant, amazing people that if we loved them and nurtured them enough, would absolutely change this country. I want to talk about the power and the importance of creating free access to university and vocational education in urban and rural areas in South Africa, which is really the journey that we've been on over these last 10 or 15 years. We've been radicals in what we've done. We've been highly innovative. We've made a lot of mistakes along the way. But thankfully, our new institute, called the Maharishi Institute, which everybody told us not to begin, just won a Global Education Award in Bahrain, which was very exciting. So it shows that times are changing. To date, over the last 10 years, we've educated 5,000, in fact, over 5,000 young people that would never have had access to university education. These young people today are earning 230 million rand in salaries that would have been otherwise on the streets unemployed. And if they just continue to work for the next 40 years in their careers and they never get a salary increase, over 9 billion rand will go back into the hands of the poor. So this is really something extremely important in this country and something that we're completely passionate that in our generation in South Africa, and I really believe this from the bottom of my heart, in our generation in South Africa, we could end poverty, we could end crime, we could end the tremendous problems we have with sickness, and we could end unemployment. But the only way we can really do it is through developing the most underdeveloped resource in this country, and that's the human assets in South Africa. And foreign development in South Africa to date has been so much about investing in infrastructure and roads and clinics and so on, but we forget about the most important thing, which is the human being. As Justin was saying, where my name comes from, I really was a very tiny little person. I was about probably under half the size of kind of everyone in my class at school. And I spent my whole life looking up at tall, big people who were kind of bigger than me and smarter than me and stronger than me. And it was so bad that when I was studying at King David's School, we had a maths teacher called Mr. Oliver who every Friday when they would collect charity, or it used to be called tzedakah, he would collect it from everybody in my class and the whole school, and then he'd come and give me the charity money at the end of the collection. And he'd say, Blecher, you little runt, go to the tuck shop and buy yourself 5 hamburgers. And that's what I had to do every single Friday, and I think it helped me grow. But it was really, I think, coming from a pretty rough background that my family came from. We were very, very poor originally, my family. My grandparents came from Latvia and Lithuania, literally with the shirts on their backs, escaping persecution. They had absolutely nothing. They were so poor that my dad had to be sent away, and he grew up the first 8 years of his life without his parents. He had to live with a family relative, and he never recovered from that. And my family understood, as a result of this poverty, the importance of university education and the importance of education as the way out of poverty, and it got deeply ingrained into my family, which is probably why out of my parents and my brothers and sisters, we've got 30 university degrees between us. And my father was the SRC president at WITS, and he was very, very concerned about the lack of access that people had in this country to education, and also about the lack of equity. And I have many memories when I was young, remembering going and waiting outside prisons for him, the prison number 4 here near Constitution Hill, where he would go and deliver the babies of black women in jail who otherwise weren't getting proper medical care, and he opened up his practice to women. My oldest brother was a big activist and much braver than me, and he went to actually go live in a township for 2 years. He was always fighting with police at Wits and running away and being tear gassed. But I wasn't nearly that brave, and I'm still not that brave. So I chose very much a capitalist commercial route, and I became an actuary. My dad said I should either become a doctor or an actuary, and I was very scared of blood. So I became an actuary, and I ended up earning over R1 million a year. I was earning about 1.3 million rand a year, and I became a management consultant through Monitor Company. And in 1994, when South Africa switched over and we had the new free South Africa, which was such an incredible time, I think we all remember that. So many people kind of hung up their running shoes, for running away from the police. And many people emigrated, and I was thinking of emigrating as well. And I actually went off to the States. I organized a job. I organized a backup job. Actuaries are very risk-averse people. I came back in case America wasn't going to work out. I organized papers for New Zealand. I organized a job in Auckland. I organized a backup job in Auckland. And in case that didn't work out, I've got a brother and a half-brother and a half-sister in Australia, and I thought they're going to be very upset if I, don't stay in America and go to New Zealand, and I could have gone to Australia. So I went to Australia and I organized a job with McKinsey & Company, and then I organized, just in case, a backup job at a big insurance company. And then I came back to South Africa and packed up my whole life, which was 43 boxes that I put in my mom's cellar. And I couldn't believe all the clutter I had accumulated, and I was ready to go. And from about 6 weeks before leaving the country, I started to just feel sick. And I've kind of felt weird often in my life, but so I just kept thinking about, why do I feel so bad? And I just couldn't get rid of this feeling. And I kept saying, don't be a baby, pack up all your stuff, get on the plane, you're going to be fine. And eventually, 2 weeks before emigrating, and I'd already resigned my job and I was ready to go, I ended up staying up all night one night. And I couldn't sleep, and it was one of those nights where you just want to knock yourself out with a knobkerrie or something like that. And I tossed and turned, and I just started sobbing and crying and thinking about my life and what I really wanted to do, and just thinking how precious life is, and it's just running away, and we're on a conveyor belt, and we're just taking care of ourselves, and we've got so many problems in this country. And Aung San Suu Kyi, who's a great hero in Burma, she says, the only real prison is fear, and the only real freedom is freedom from fear. And I know my whole life, fear has held me back from doing the things I really believe in. But here's the reality. We're never going to have a true democracy in this country. We're never going to have a stable future in South Africa unless every single child born in this land has equal access to proper quality education, to university education, and to proper opportunities. We've thrown away absolutely millions of people in this society. So that night I was thinking about what we could do, what could I do. I didn't know anything about doing good for anybody. I wasn't a brave person. I knew about how to make money and consult to mining companies and things like that. But I thought if we want to create a real democracy, a real human democracy, we've got to do something about education. Prince Hamlet in Shakespeare's Hamlet says, and I've always loved this line from when I learned this in school, what a piece of work is a man. How noble in reason, how infinite in faculty, in form and in moving, how expressed and how admirable, in apprehension, how like an angel, in action, how like a god. This is what it is to be human, and yet we just throw away human beings in their millions and billions. 2 to 4 billion people in the world live on $2 a day or less. In this country, 49% of our population still today, 2010, lives on less than $2 a day. We can send rockets to the moon. We can create supercomputers. We can do the most extraordinary things, and yet at the same time, we're raping each other. Every 8 minutes, a woman gets raped in this country, and all these terrible things that are going on around us, and yet these are human problems. I'd come across a school when I was working, that took average people and it was able to turn them into superstars. They'd go from the 50th percentile of all Americans to the top 1 percentile of all Americans. And they've done this every single year for 20 years. It's really, most universities like previous speaker was saying on the video, they really take geniuses, and we're not so interested in that because most human beings are not ostensibly what we'd think of as geniuses, but yet they really are geniuses waiting to happen. And I'm much more interested in a university model that isn't about genius in, genius out. So I'd read about this model, and by the morning I decided, despite my fear, I've still got fear, I'm going to stay in South Africa and try and make a difference. And I went to go talk to a little organization that had been helping people in townships learn meditation in schools and had some very interesting results. And I went to them and I said, look, I know nothing about doing good for people, but can I join your organization? I've decided not to emigrate. And they said, well, you know, we've got to think about this. And I said, well, how long is that going to take? I thought it's like getting into McKinsey, you know, or Monitor. They said, well, can you stand on the other side of the room? And so I did, and then about 45 seconds later, they called me back and they said, would I like to be the CEO of CEDA? And I was like, wow, this is great. You know, I'm only 1 week away from not emigrating and all these cool jobs overseas, and here I am, I'm the CEO of this organization. And then I realized, well, the organization's only got 2 people in it, and it's absolutely hugely in debt, owes an enormous amount of money to the bank, and then I realized it's a hell of a lot easier to get into a bankrupt nonprofit than it is to get into one of these multinational consulting firms. Anyway, so I became the CEO of this organization. I'd never been in a township in my life. Day one, I went into Alexandra Township, and 4 guys rocked my car and called me Mlungu and were screaming at me. And I thought, gee, maybe this is not so good. And day 2, I went out and I brought a very, very bright purple Hyundai Accent car. And I thought, if I get killed, at least you know, people are going to find my body because this car is so bright, they're not going to be able to spray paint. Like, they're going to have to do layers of spray paint before they can hide this thing. And then every single day in my purple car, I was going into the schools. And by day 10, I completely fell in love with the youth of this country and just realized, God, we are sitting on a gold mine here. This is the real gold of Africa, is our youth. By about day 100, I had, you know, been going into these schools every single day. We were having amazing results. I sat at break time one day with 10 girls, had got very close to these students, and it turned out 9 of them had been raped. Teacher came in after break and started to teach that Christopher Columbus sailed to America and the year he sailed in and the names of his ships. And I looked around at the faces of these girls, and they were absolutely broken. There was just no relationship between the education they learn and what they're feeling. They're so alone, they got no future in their lives. And that day I really swore that we need to create a new kind of education, an education that is just radically different to how we all grew up. That's really about human beings and develops full, passionate human beings, because that's an unstoppable force. And by day 1,000, we had now been in the townships for over 3.5 years. We had educated 9,000 kids, worked with 9,000 school kids. We had increased pass rates on over 100,000 school marks by 25%. We had a control group of over 100,000 school marks as well that had dropped a percentage point. We thought we were doing very well, only to find that a huge number of these kids that we were educating would come back and they ended up on the streets. And we started to think, well, actually helping nobody, getting them through high school. Millennium Development Goals is all about putting everybody into school, and yet it's actually better to be in school and keep failing than it is to finish school and end up unemployed without a job and you can't go to university. So we came up with a crazy idea, and this was in 1999, and we said we want to try to create South Africa's first free university. And we had no buildings, we had no books, we had no money, we had no teachers, we had no curriculum, we had no accreditation. In fact, we only had debt. And we decided we were going to create South Africa's first free university, and we wanted to charge 350 Rand for a whole year of university, and including books and materials and everything else. And at that time when we did research, South Africa had only 47 black dentists for 37 million black people in this country. We had 1 black actuary, 1,000 actuaries in the country, and about 2 years later, we doubled the number of actuaries in the country to 2. And we had about 200 black accountants out of 20,000. It was just a horrible situation. And what we wanted to do, and again, it's like a number of things we've done them out of complete naivety. Later on, we've had to work out as we've gone along, with making a lot of mistakes, we better get this right or it's going to be very laughable. But we wanted to prove that you could take somebody who had grown up on the streets and that they could become a chartered accountant, they could become a merchant banker, they could become a stockbroker. It's easy to take, just your geniuses and put them through university, but can you take very average people from illiterate families and help them go to university and go on and pass the board exams as accountants and things like that? And of course, everybody said we were crazy. And so we ended up advertising. We got 3,500 students to a university that didn't exist. Day one, we had 350 students arriving in this building that we managed to get in downtown Joburg. It was a real dump of a building. We had nothing. We had no computers, no library, absolutely nothing. Just 400 plastic chairs. And we welcomed the students and we said, welcome to South Africa's first free university. And we were very proud, and we said, we want you to meet the founders of the university, and the 5 of us stood forward, and we were shaking their hands. And then we said, we'd like you to meet the faculty who are going to teach you every day. And we all stepped back 1 step, and then we all stepped forward again. And then we said, we'd like them to meet the administrative staff. And we stepped back, and then the same 5 people stepped forward, and we said, this is where they've got to go register. And then we said, we want them to meet the cleaners. And very quickly, a lot of these students realized, we may be poor, but we're not stupid. This is never going to be a university. And we lost 100 students in one day of our 350 students. And that's how we started. We just had nothing. We had to teach everything. Eventually, PricewaterhouseCoopers agreed that they would become our accounting faculty. Monitor became the strategy faculty. Bowman Gilfillan became our legal faculty. We ended up having more chartered accountants running around the place than an accounting firm, and certainly more than Wits University. And that's how we built the university. We had no computers. We taught our students to type on a Xerox copy of a computer keyboard. And after 6 weeks, we found on a DOS downloaded version of a typing tutor that 90% of our students could type at 30 words a minute. And we were just celebrating. This is about the underdog coming up, and that our students could learn to type on a piece of paper. We had absolutely, just nothing. Our students every day used to play imaginary cricket, imaginary soccer. We had all these empty rooms in this building. And one day I walked past one of the multi-purpose rooms. It's just a big empty room. And I thought one of our students was having an epileptic fit. And it turned out they were playing imaginary cricket with an imaginary bat, an imaginary ball. There was a coach, there was imaginary wickets, and the bowler was bowling this imaginary ball, the batsman was hitting this imaginary ball. And I thought these students had gone absolutely crazy, and until I just watched them day after day practicing this imaginary cricket. And then they ended up competing in a competition, and they played 9 matches in a row, and they won every single match, and they'd only played imaginary cricket. So over these years, there's so many things I could tell you, but I'm running out of time. Over these years, just miracles happen to us. There's this incredible German proverb. It says, just begin to weave and God will provide the thread. You don't have any thread. We wanted to build this university and we had absolutely nothing. And everything we've done, we've just started from ground zero, never got a cent from government, and you just start to dream of the colors you want and what you want to build, and somehow, as if by magic, these colors come and all this thread arrives, and we've been able to get buildings and books, and we've brought 300,000 books into the country and thousands of computers into South Africa, and have educated now thousands of people. And in the process, Oprah got involved, and Michael Dell got involved, and the Dalai Lama came to visit us on the same day as Sir Richard Branson, and Madiba's got involved, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and just so many incredible things could have happened that we could have never imagined. And so what we've seen now over this time, I do have to conclude soon, is over 5,000 people that were thrown away by society, some of whom have come from street shelters, many from deep rural areas, others from the informal settlements of South Africa, have now come through university, have made it when everybody said they would never make it. And they're now graduates. Many of them have gone on and done master's degrees, are now working throughout South Africa. And between them, as I mentioned, are earning 230 million rand in salaries. And as I mentioned in the beginning, over 9 billion rand will go back into those families. Now, we want to multiply this 100-fold. So 3 years ago, we decided in Community Individual Development Association to leave Cedar City campus, which is an absolutely wonderful university, but to take this model further and try and create a self-funding university, a university for an urban area and a rural area that you could set up and it could run itself and fund itself. And this is where we started the Marishi Institute. And the idea is to make it economically self-sufficient. So we put a business, and we've launched a call center called Invincible Outsourcing, where the students can answer the phones for people anywhere over the world or do back office administration work and undercut the whole BPO market. But if they're learning marketing, they do marketing in the call center. If they're doing finance, they do finance in the call center, accountancy, HR, etc. And this way they go to university for free and can actually earn money while they're there, which is going to keep them in school. They're going to be able to support their family, and they're going to be able to make the school self-funding. So this is our dream, is that we do want to get to 100,000 students over the next, I would say in the next 15, 20 years, 100,000 people at least. And a dear friend of mine, Vincent, is sitting at the back there, and he came up with that number, and that's the number we want to go for. If we educate 100,000 people in sub-Saharan Africa through university, this will put 650 billion rand into the hands of the poor. So I want to just conclude with my favorite quote, and it's from Albert Einstein, a fantastic scientist who, he said this incredible thing. I think it's his most amazing quote. He said, "Everything is a miracle, or nothing is a miracle, and it's your choice." And it's kind of deep, because I didn't get that when I first heard it. But really in life, we either live in a world full of problems, full of chaos, full of doubts and worries and fear, or we're going to choose to create the world, which is the miracle that life is, in which we grow up from a tiny little seed and learn to jump and sing and create and do poetry and protect the oceans and do all the great things that these beautiful, magnificent TED people are doing, and people all over the world. And this is our precious planet that we've got to save, and we've got to create this miracle in South Africa that Einstein wants us to create. Thank you.